Activating the value chain is the subject of our next roundtable. Our speakers are Anabela Pinto, Head of Supply Chain at Mondalti, Suzanne Greene, Global Purchasing Sustainability Director and Scope 3 Subject Matter Expert, Lluis Sabate, EMEA Coagulant Manufacturing, and Jesús Soriano, Responsible Care Manager at Spanish Chemical Industry Federation, that will join us online. Hello. Good morning to all. I will start with Jesús. How chemical industry, Jesús, could fulfill the European Transitional Pathway Principles successfully?
Yeah. I think in Europe we have now the transitional pathway that has been elaborated by the European Commission. I think there are 4 axles here, and I think we should be digital, we should be circular, we should be climate change neutral, and of course sustainable products. So I think in the special case of the supply chains, transport are a very important point, because transport and logistics are special. The increasing ratio of the logistics and transport is probably 2-fold or 3-fold the average ratio of the general economy, and I think this should be. We should bear in mind that in this case, the transitional pathway for the defossilization travel has been. We have to be very careful about this, because the different ways, the different typology of the transport are very different. We could talk about urban transport, we could talk about long distance transport, we talk about intermodal transport, we talk about maritime transport, and I think each typology has its own resolution. I think in the industry, I think we have reached figures about enhancement, reduction of CO2 emission, or generation of waste, or energy efficiency. So I think the main important point now is the supply chain, because the supply chain of the chemical industry are really quite complex. And I think in the future, we should face these problems. And the next industry of Europe has a very difficult, very difficult to work to face. I think that's my opinion.
Thank you, Jesús. Anabela, the European Union transition pathway for chemical industry is a problem or is a solution?
I think at the end it will be an opportunity for all companies. It means addressing all challenges that we have, like environmental challenging, what we have to do to reduce the emissions and have a better footprint, become greener on the logistics, on the whole overall supply chain, and addressing the ethical responsibility as well. I think we can have opportunities like be more collaborative between stakeholders on the supply chain, what is need to to address as well some indicators and share information and have a deep knowledge about all supply chain, which brings a more collaborative, like I said, and a more supply chain more resilient because of the knowledge that we can get on that. And will be other opportunities like I think the innovation will come more because we'll need more eco-friendly products and the companies can work together to achieve that. At the end, I think the supply chain become greener, resilient, and in terms of costs, at beginning I think we can have a bigger cost because all these changes at beginning will make some extra costs, but at the end I think when everything is harmonized and on standard way, that new standard, the costs will have no impact at the end because we are responding as well on consumer demanding that are more and more demanding for greener products, eco-friendly products. So to stay competitive or stay on the market, we need to go on this pathway.
Suzanne, what do you think about it?
No, I completely agree, and I think we have to take the value chain lens, right? And if you look at a company like Dow, about 2/3 of our emissions are related to the value chain. Half of that is from our suppliers, so our logistics suppliers, raw materials, capital goods, things like that. The other half is downstream. So we have to also look towards our customers and towards our communities. So that's things including, what happens to the products that we sell. Dow sells products that are mixed with fuels and are burned. Okay, so that's our responsibility. What's our commercial strategy towards the things we sell? And then another part of that is what happens to our products at the end of their lives. And that's where we start to get into recycling, design for recycling, making recyclable products, making sure recycling can happen. And what I think is really interesting for a company like Dow is when you have incineration of waste and Dow's products aren't recycled, that maybe there's no facility to recycle a product and it goes into incineration, that's actually a huge part of Dow's value chain emissions. So we need to get the products out before they're recycled. So I think if we look across that whole lens, then we see, okay, there are different levers we can pull to decarbonize. There are different responsibilities that we have from what we buy and what we sell, where Dow can be a player in this renewable or low carbon transition that we all need to make.
Lluis, can you give us your insight about it?
Thank you very much also for the invitation, Planetiers and Bondalti. And the European transition pathway comes with a lot of responsibility. If I remember correctly, there are more than 200 actions on this. That has been a long work together, European Commission and the industry. So there is a lot of work there. And maybe echoing the question that Susanna was putting to the previous panel, and it's like some kind of call for action. We need to move from the strategic claims and wording to really action. And now with this transition pathway is no escape for that. So we really need to move forward.
Jesús, in what ways companies reduce their carbon footprint to their supply chains? Can you give us examples? Oh, I think your sound is off.
Yeah. Could you repeat again, please? I can hear you.
In what ways can companies reduce their carbon footprint through their supply chains?
In the European chemical industry, it exists a group of standards for the logistics operator provider that are the SQIS, and in this I think this is a very success history standards for the evaluation of the logistics provider services. I think we have a method to measure the emission of greenhouse gas emission. I think we in the European chemical industry we have these kind of standards with a mature long history, and all our providers are transport hauliers or logistics operator providers. They are very, very well aware about what that is. I think we have a methodology, and we have the requirements, the strategical measure to apply in this supply chain. For example, I think there are a very major problem in all of Europe, especially so in the special Iberian region. I think is the impulse of the rail mode in Spain. I think 96 or 95% of the freight transport is use the road mode. I think we have to make that our best strong efforts to impulse the intermodality chains, and to optimize, of course, our methodology of life cycle assessment for the packaging, for the material that are important for the supply chains, liners, and other materials. So I think if we should focus the resolution of the problem, I think we have a very long opportunity with the impulse of the intermodality. I think that is one of the best options. Then standards, of the sectorial standards as SQIS, and intermodality in the supply chain. I think that's the main important point. Thank you.
What do you think, Anabela?
I think Jesus has right, but I also think that the new fuels will come before that we have a properly railway in Iberia to the intermodality, because unfortunately here in Iberia we have not infrastructures enough or that can respond to the needs that are in place. So that's why we need road transportation. But that is something that the government together must address, to invest on the railway infrastructure, because it's really needed and is what we see in Europe. The intermodal transportation is very used, and here we don't use that. So let's see.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I think we're in an exciting time right now, because we start to see really offers coming from our suppliers for low carbon products and services. So transportation is one of them. We start to see real opportunities to do decarbonization. And what I see coming is direct decarbonization. So something like a product made with bio-based material, something like that, really a direct low carbon product. But we're also seeing kind of indirect decarbonization. So something like book and claim certificates, renewable energy certificates, mass balance, things like that, that you may get a certificate where you pay towards decarbonizing somewhere else. So transportation is a great example of that. we can buy a certificate for sustainable aviation fuel that goes somewhere out in the supply chain. It might not move my goods particularly, but we're contributing to a low carbon fuel being used somewhere, right? So I think these opportunities are something that we need to consider, that maybe you have to think, okay, decarbonization isn't going to happen all at once around the world, right? It might happen in bits and pieces here and there, and we need to support it where it is available. And I think the previous speaker made a good point. Thank you for it. It can be more expensive, right? We see, okay, a bio-based product, that's going to cost 3 times more, 5 times more. Our procurement professionals, they're trained to not pay more. That's what they learn in school. We're not going to pay more for something. So this is a whole new field of sustainable procurement to say, okay, when are we willing to pay more? Or is there a negotiation we can do? And we've had some of our sourcing managers do that. We say, okay, if you want our business, you need to give it to us at no cost or cheaper. So there are techniques you can use where you can still contribute towards decarbonization without always paying more. But hey, sometimes you do need to pay more. Someone needs to pay. So these low carbon fuels are more expensive. So I think that's something we all need to work on together. How are we going to share the costs? How is this going to work in the real world?
That's the principal challenge.
Yeah, well, fully agree what we have been saying until now, but if I take it from another angle, one thing that I really feel that we need to be approaching that in a more meaningful way is data. We need more data, reliable data, consistent. So I think that the professionals in procurement, as Joe was saying, or in the supply chain, they need to really deep dive in the value chain and try to find. We have said until now the win-win situations, but maybe it has to be a win-win-win-win, 4 steps. We need to put together all this deep dive understanding and find the opportunities and mitigate the risk that also was said before. I'm sure that there are a lot of opportunities that we can also take there.
Jesus, do you agree with the idea that supply chains are never been under more pressure than now?
Yeah, I think at the end there are very clear deadlines, and it's a political decision to fulfill these deadlines. And in the particular case of logistics, I think there is a very high pressure in the particular case of translate all to the hydrogen or electrification as fuel. And I think there are other technologies that may be very, very important to fulfill each stage of the pathway. The eco-fuels, for example. I think in the particular case of Spain, there is a type of eco-fuels that is hydrogen vegetable oil, is HVO. It's a material that in Spain is available and maybe a middle solution, maybe a link between the all fossil fuels energy providers and the next zero emission of greenhouse gases emission. I think in each part of our Europe there is availability of alternative eco-fuels, and I think it's we are talking about always about hydrogen and electricity. I think the neutral technology is a principle that it's important to bear in mind, and it's it's needed to spread the different solutions and the different stage to fulfill that objective is the net zero emission.
Thank you, Jesus. Anabela, the demand for sustainability is reshaping the supply chain and the procurement.
Yes, is reshaping the way that we do procurement and the old logistics, because we have to have a big picture about everything. Besides the context that the world context that is always changing, we have to take care of these new requirements of the sustainability and to address that on the supply chain and procurement. So it's reshaping the way that we have to deal with the suppliers, how we need to know them, how we can work together to reduce the footprint on the logistics, how we can have different logistics, how we can have indicators, shared indicators, that we can have common strategies to address those indicators. So is a different, is a new era in procurement and in the supply chain at the end, and is in beginning, and what we see is the lack of knowledge on the overall supply chain, lack of tools that can help us to have information, the data, or work the data, have a baseline. I think we still need to have a baseline and start work on that.
Suzanne, are there specific industry standards or certification that are particularly effective in promoting environmentally sustainable supply chains?
Yes, I think there's a growing number of different standards and certificates that we can follow and use in our procurement. And, Dow being in the middle of many global value chains, I think we have a specific responsibility as a customer and as a supplier to use those standards. So I'm very big on this, that we try to do things in a harmonized way. So when I ask our suppliers to report on carbon emissions or different ESG standards, I use the most mainstream respected platforms like Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, EcoVadis. We're not going out and we're not sending our own specialized questionnaire. We say, we're going to use what everyone else uses. And then that's what Dow uses to report to our customers. So we say we're not going to do something different here in the middle of the supply chain. We need to be the link, make things easier. One initiative I can speak about that I've been a part of for many years is the Smart Freight Center's Global Logistics Emissions Council, and maybe you know about this too. About almost 5 years ago now, we published the GLEC framework, the Global Logistics Emissions Council framework, and I wrote this with my colleague Alan Lewis, and this was something that maybe you mentioned maybe your family says, oh, this is boring, why are you doing these technical things, this is so nerdy, but writing a carbon accounting methodology for freight transportation, that actually turned out to be a very meaningful initiative to get companies to report on what are your carbon emissions using the same harmonized, consistent methodology. And when we wrote the first version of the methodology, actually that was back in 2016, people said, we don't need this, why are you doing this, we don't need another carbon accounting method. But in fact we did, because there were a lot of inconsistencies between the way maybe trucking companies, shipping, aviation, rail calculated their emissions. So you really couldn't compare one company to another, one service to another. switching to intermodal transport, how do you actually add that up in carbon emissions? I think the Smart Freight Center did that really well, that when we developed the methodology, we brought different shippers, carriers together to say, how do we calculate carbon emissions? What should be in the calculation? And that was almost a diplomatic effort, I guess you could say, to bring together the industry, that there wasn't agreement on certain things. Should we include all greenhouse gases? Or should we maybe leave some out? The CO2e versus CO2. Which part of the fuel life cycle should we include in our carbon accounting? Should we include making the fuel, producing the fuel, distributing it, or just combustion of the fuel? These were discussions that took years, honestly, to get the industry together. And I think through that process of discussing, we all learned a lot about how you calculate emissions, how you share emissions. And now the GLEC framework became an ISO standard this year. So it's ISO 14083. And that's actually a huge achievement in the industry, to have a new ISO that's globally agreed upon method. And you can see, and I can see it now in my work at Dow, that our transportation providers actually give us the best data of all of our suppliers. I have to say, on a whole, of course, there are many good suppliers that give us good data, but on a whole, the transportation suppliers give us excellent data. And I think it is from that consistent, harmonized approach that we were able to build over time. And I do the Scope 3 accounting at Dow. And last year was the first year we included supplier data in our Scope 3 accounting. And for our transportation suppliers, we could report 50% of our emissions with supplier data. And that's actually really cool, amazing way to show the good effort of the industry to come along this far with consistency. So I think that these methodology discussions, there's a whole lot more going on right now. With the chemical industry, maybe you heard Together for Sustainability is leading some initiatives. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, all these groups have these technical discussions that are hard to follow and maybe a bit dry, but in the end, I think it has that same result of okay, we all learn together, we all grow, and then we can speak the same language.
Luis, should the European Union have stronger intervention at the public policies, for example?
Say again, sorry.
Should the European Union should have a stronger intervention at the level of public policies?
Well, I think the transition pathway is already a big step on that side. I mean, there are an alignment on. I mean, if I remember correctly, the transition. Justin probably knows a lot more than that, but it's 8 blocks, and one of them is legislation as well. That it's developing and putting the roadmap for whole legislation is going to came on this short, medium, and long term. So that is already there. But I'm sure that on top of the legislation, it's the request from the society that is going to come in first. I mean, all the consumers, all the collaboration between companies is going to be the things more quicker even than the legislation. But of course, we have the frame there, and we know that we need to be ready to adapt. Quick adaptation to that, because again, as Suzanne was saying, in 2030 is around the corner, and we need to move quickly. So.
What do you think about that, Jesús?
Okay, I think the pressure of the European Union is quite high. I think there are enough tools that has been approved by the European Union to control and to decrease the emission of greenhouse gas emission. I think it is a revolution, a future revolution, the application of the emission trade scheme to the transport. I think in the year 2024, it is compulsory to measure the emissions of the greenhouse gas emission. And I think the first year for paying the emission is a 1927. I think this is a very strong measure. And absolutely, I don't know how we could fulfill this requirement, because the eco fuels are not very well. It's that technology, but the economical viability, the price of these products, I think it's necessary to have more time. Bear in mind that in our cases, in the case of transport, this is not a plant operation, or our road, our pathway. Who choose the pathway? Our customers. Our customers. If there is a customers outside of Europe or very near from my plant, that's not. I do not have the control of that. My customer is maybe next to my plant, or maybe 3,000 kilometers far away. Okay, my proposal is to decrease. So I think the regulation that has been put into practice with the regulation of controls of road vehicles, standard road vehicles, Euro 6, Euro 7, emission trade scheme, methodology for to measure this. I think that there are many tools. I am not sure how this could fit in the general objective. Probably, I think the deadlines, probably in the future, maybe necessary to review these deadlines, I'm afraid.
Anabela.
I've been lost on this all of answers. But I think there are some information, in terms of information, I think the carriers are the ones that can give us today some information. Regarding the other information that we need to respond to all what the regulation is asking and everything, is a lot of information that needs to have a huge transparency between supplier and the client, and needs to have confidence on the partnership that exists. So, or is that built, the real partnership, that there are confidence to share information and to address all requirements of the regulation, because it's a lot of regulation that is coming, and addressing also the reduction of emissions, like CBAM or ETS now on the maritime transportation, and a lot of...
Some of them are pointless?
No, I think not. I think altogether will help to achieve the main goal, that is reduce the emission and have a greener planet at the end.
Suzanne, how can a company ensure that its suppliers and partners share its commitment to environmental sustainability?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and you know, for me, when I look at what I can ask our suppliers to do, I have to look at what Dow has promised to do, right? I can't ask our suppliers to do more than Dow is willing to do. So that's my secret mission inside of Dow, is to push Dow to be even more sustainable because it helps me in my job, right, to push our supply chain. So we mirror, I mirror Dow's goals in our supplier requests. And we use different tools for that. So we have our supplier code of conduct. This is a really important tool that procurement professionals use to say, this is what we're looking for from our suppliers. And we rewrote it last year, completely reinvented it. And what you can see, if you're a nerdy person like me that likes to read codes of conduct, you can see in there what we have is environmental, social, governance restrictions. So we have mandatory principles in there and say you must follow these principles to do business with Dow. No question. There's no forced labor, right? Of course, we'll not support any child labor, something like that, human rights. Then we have our best practices. And this shows our suppliers this is the direction that we're going. So what we want to see over time. When you think about something like carbon emissions, like I said before, you can't snap your fingers and have zero carbon emissions. It's going to take some time to do the energy transition. So we can say what we're looking for, how we're going to be asking our suppliers to evolve over time. So maybe we'll ask, we want you to set a net zero 2050 goal. Be looking in that direction. And then as we revise the code of conduct year after year, okay, we'll turn up the ambition year after year, and a best practice may become a mandatory principle. So this is one, again, not the most exciting document in the world to read, but we put it in our tenders. So before we even select a supplier, we say, can you comply with the code of conduct? If you can't, then there's no point in going further. Then it's also in all our contracts and all our purchase orders. So that's really a key foundational lever in procurement. But then we go beyond that as well. So we can kind of segment our supplier base based on the things we're buying from them to say, okay, are you a high CO2 or a climate supplier? Then we ask those high CO2 suppliers to do additional things, right? So we might ask you to fill out that CDP questionnaire. Tell us what your climate strategy is. Tell us how much renewable energy you're using. Tell us what are your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. What's the product carbon footprint of what you're selling to us? So they're like high emissions equals high ambitions. So we're going to have more requests. If we're buying something from a supplier that could be related to something like forced labor, or human rights issue, or high water use or deforestation, then we have identified those suppliers. It doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong, right? But we say, okay, there's a chance, there's a risk. And then we have specific things we're asking them to do in addition to the basic. So that's how we tier the program, and it takes collaboration and discussion, and I think that's really part of it too, that yes, you can have a contract, but when we have meetings with suppliers, then we can bring up these things. Hey, we got your CDP report. We saw you don't have a net zero goal. What's going on? When will you set one? And again, that goes back to our procurement professionals that we work with them to train them to have these discussions, right? Or bring me to have the discussion, then we all learn together, how do we collaborate to reach net zero? So it really, I think, there are tools and techniques and education, learning, discussion. Meetings like this, gatherings like this are really important to progressing us forward.
Lluis, which are the opportunities ahead working with all partners in the value chain to drive a change?
Well, I think I was listening now to Suzanne, and our way of working is extremely similar to what we are doing. So we have the code of conduct as a baseline, and then we have made also the exercise of segmenting, identifying customers, and working with them with additional requests of CDP or EcoVadis. And of course, what we see is that there are front runners on that. That is very easy to connect, to dialogue. We see that there are still people that are struggling with all that. So, but we need to work together, as we were saying. And for me, going back to my previous comment, I think that the professionals today on procurement and supply chain is really, they're having a hard time because they need really to understand a long value chain. They need to go one step more, probably, than the direct supplier, even what is behind them, labor or human rights that you were saying, and maybe. So they need to also work with them. What are they doing with their own suppliers? So going one step more and try to find these opportunities. So this is really an opportunity. I'm sure there are opportunities, maybe sometimes not direct with a direct supplier, but one step before or after. In our case, the majority of our scope 3 is in the raw materials. This is what we have identified. Our products are really going to improve water treatment or efficiency in pulp and paper industry. So identifying our carbon footprint is really going upwards, and that is where we are focusing a lot on raw materials.
Unfortunately, we don't have more time, but would anyone like to add anything? Jesús?
Yeah, finally. And thank you. I can remember. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be online. Thank you for your help. So finally, I think the economical vector is very important. I think in the current situation, there is a problem in Europe with the inflation ratio, with the ratio of interest. I think economical parameters are not very. I think it's a kind of obstacles for the transition. I hope the economical situation will be getting better in the future, because I think if the economical parameters are not favorable for us, the transition it would last a long way. So now I think we are not very optimistic with the speed. I'm sure that the transition will be a success in this age, or in the next 10 years, or in the 30 years later. So I think now it's a problem, the economical situation. Okay, I think we should bear in mind that there are other two main important regions at global level, China and the States. And I think Europe should apply regulation and set rules for this game, because I think China and the States, they play with other different game. I think that's very important. If we have success in this, I think we could reach good goals at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesús. Anabela?
I just
Final
want
words?
to add that in case of Moderator, we have a lot of suppliers that are small companies. In Portugal, most of companies are small or medium small, so they don't have the knowledge or the trained human research to deal with this matter, and we need to help them to achieve the goals that we are requesting and everything. So it's a hard work for procurement, for sustainability departments, because they really need to be trained and to be. We have to put them make the boarding with them, but helping them training, and will be difficult at the end, I think.
It's quite hard, but quite important work.
Yeah.
Suzanne?
Agree on the need for training. And I would just, I guess my last word is, hey, everybody is a customer. We can all demand greener goods, products. That's all of our responsibilities, to put out the demand, ask for what you want. The companies are listening, whether you're spending billions per year or a lot less, ask for what you want, and the market is listening.
That's an important word, responsibility. We all have. Lluis?
Yeah, maybe as a final word, just a couple of things. Again, going back to my first thing, is data. I mean, we need a lot of data and transparency to be able to set meaningful targets and move from the strategic claims really to the actions. And one thing I like, it maybe completely different, is what has been said in the presentation, is about people. I think that people, even our workers, and we have seen that also in the recruitments, I mean, people is really willing to work for companies that have really a sustainable approach. So it's something that is coming, really popping out in all the recruitments. And I think it's important. Young people really wants to see some action in the companies. And I think it's also a message that we need to receive and take care of all this responsibility as a company.
Now, we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. Anyone? Yes, there's a question from Miriam.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask you, as private sector, you know that we have these directives from European Union regarding green public procurement. Now is evolving for sustainable or circular public procurement. As suppliers for public institutions, have you felt some differences on the last years concerning the way the public sector is dealing with you as suppliers regarding some strategies or limitations concerning public procurement?
Okay. If I start, then yes, and from different approaches. But one is, we have a nice story that where we have been developing renewable products for water treatment in this case. And even it was a soft start because of the premium that we have been discussing. I mean, many now, the curve is just really rising at all. I mean, the companies, the public sector also is taking and paying a lot of attention to the sustainability long-term approach. And that we can feel that little by little, this is giving in tenders, this is appearing this sustainable aspect for the procurement from the public sector. Maybe not at the same level, that price still, or quality, but over the time, I think that will be at that similar level. I don't know if I can say the same level, but at least that we can feel that, really.
Suzanne?
Thanks. Well, I was feeling quite inspired by the panel. And I was actually thinking about what Suzanne was also mentioning about the cost of transformation. And definitely, I think we all should, admit that this comes with a cost. This comes with a cost. And we see in history a lot of great things that can come from transformation. For instance, in cities like Bilbao in Spain has suffered major transformation. It comes from having industry city and transforming, and now actually populations feel a lot of higher quality in life, in the air they breathe, etc. For instance, in Lisbon, we also had this huge transformation derived from Expo 98, from a site that was heavily polluted due to heavy industry, that nowadays is actually a very touristic site. So it all comes with a cost. And thinking about pricing and in the supply chain and the negotiation between buying raw materials until the end consumer, for instance, considering CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and there is a lot of discussion whether this will input a higher cost to the last consumer. I would like to hear your perspectives from how these regulations, for instance, CBAM or others, will impact the costs of the products at the final consumer, and which type of consumer profile we'll have in the future that will also influence the supply chains.
Who starts?
I could maybe I'll give a sideways answer and then someone can give a more direct answer. But something I'm observing that I think is really interesting is the cost to decarbonize a company like Dow's operations, huge capital costs, right? Billions to upgrade facilities, and it may or may not really impact all the product carbon footprints, the thing that goes to the customer. You know, there's this like huge investments required. The cost per ton of CO2 reduced is high. But when we start to look across the supply chain and our operations, if we say, okay, we're going to look at scope 1, 2, and 3 and look at the cost per ton of CO2 to decarbonize, if we want to get to net zero across everything, and we look at the suite of projects that are available, and something really interesting starts to happen, right? That some projects in the supply chain in scope 3 are a whole lot cheaper. And even buying something I mentioned, carbon inset or book and claim certificates for low carbon fuel, that actually offsets the cost of some of the ETS tax, the carbon tax. So there are these mechanisms coming forward that when you compare across scope 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't seem that expensive anymore, right? If you look at the big capital costs. So I imagine that many companies are kind of doing this math, looking at the marginal abatement cost curve for carbon, and some interesting numbers are starting to come out that might influence these, big picture decarbonization strategies. So if anyone has a more direct answer, please go.
I would say that CBAM in beginning will bring more costs because it's a tax regarding importations, mostly will be costly from countries that don't have a carbon mechanism. But the question is, there is alternative in Europe, or we need to import that material? Because with the whole globalization, and we see with pandemics and all of that we are living, there are a lack of industry in Europe. So we don't have other alternative than import and pay. And someone at the end needs to pay that. So what we see is some countries building or trying to have a carbon mechanism like Europe to avoid the lack of exportation of them, or to avoid the decrease of the exportation for their countries. And that can reduce the cost that we need to pay receiving that materials. But yes, in beginning will bring more costs, this CBAM.
For me, it's difficult to give an answer. If we were looking for a percentage, I cannot give you that but because we are not at the beginning of the value chain. So of course that will depend a lot on how much is coming from that. Then we need to apply it to our product. But of course, what has been mentioned also this morning was efficiency. So it's a lot of what that we will need to work on efficiency and mitigation on that in our own facilities to work and try to mitigate and not to just pass through all the costs that will be coming. And that, I'm sure that is not over the night, of course. It will take some time, but that will be a very, very heavy work from us.
That's it. Thank you all. It was a pleasure. See you one day. Have a nice day.
Thank you.